Owen,
yes,
you want to finish?
Yes, thanks very much. I'm very glad that I spoke last after Mark, because actually demolishing what Mark just said is going to be far more interesting than anything I was going to say. So let's first go for it. As a China expert, you'll be familiar with Mao's concept of the running dog of capitalism. I find it extraordinary that you should take Pavlovsky's concept of sovereign democracy and cite that as a way of Russia creating some kind of new thinking. Because in fact, I think what I can usefully contribute to this debate is sort of worm's eye view from the ground in Moscow at the time, at this time. And what I see is an elite which is completely and utterly devoted primarily not to the kind of foreign policy initiatives and which Dr. Pravda has described, but to self-enrichment and to self-perpetuation. And I think those two issues are by no means mutually exclusive. One can analyse the policy part, and as Dr. Pravda does, far more effectively than I can. But what I can tell you is that essentially the whole idea of sovereign democracy is a way of dressing up the elimination of competitive democracy, and purely in the interest of keeping the Russian elite in power and keeping the what you might call corporatist state, but basically divvying up politics and most importantly business in Russia up between the same small group of people without having to worry about being overturned by anything so inconvenient as the people. And I find it absolutely laughable, the references to Pavlovsky running the Putin election campaign, the Putin election campaign with no opponent. And the difference between Russian democracy and democracy as we know it is not some complex sort of comment on, it's not some complex refinement of democracy as it is understood. It's the difference between fake democracy and real democracy. In other words, the difference between one and two parties. And that really makes a difference because nor did Pavlovsky invent the system. In fact, one has to look to Putin's own origins because in East Germany, as Dr. Pravda will surely know better than I, actually did have elections throughout the East German period, throughout various sham parties that were set up by the communist system, and those elections had no bearing or were no threat to the monopoly of power that were held by the East German Communist Party. So my essential 2 points are these, that the priorities of the elite is entirely about self-perpetuation. And I don't really see a particularly coherent strategy. I mean, one can go to, one can debate with various undoubtedly clever people. I have no issue with your assertion that the Kremlin is full of clever people, but I think they're clever and incredibly cynical people. They may have a point of view about NATO expansion, they may have a point of view about foreign interference in post-Soviet space and all this. But actually, the bottom line, what underpins all this, which is often ignored in all these debates, is that it's all about eliminating any challenge to the power of the current ruling clique. That's what that is their motivation. And they invite clever people to Valda, the Valdai conference every year to debate the ins and outs of this the Russian sort of pseudo-democracy. But basically, the whole raison d'etre of the pseudo-democracy is all about creating a monopoly of power. And this is, I think, an important consideration when one tries to reconcile what we've seen this last week with sort of hugs and smiles between Obama and Medvedev, and this apparent chemistry and positive noises that you always hear when these people are in the room together. Try and reconcile that with what one hears inside Russia, which is a constant stream of extremely primitive, nasty polemic against the West, against NATO, which is constantly broadcast on all Russian state-controlled news channels. So actually, and the way to reconcile those 2 points is that there's actually simply not a coherent policy. It's completely ad hoc, and to that extent, the Georgia issue was something that Putin had been going on about for a long time, and they had, of course, prepared for a war in May of 2008 in Abkhazia. It didn't quite reach boiling point, and then finally hit in Ossetia, slightly to everyone's surprise. 4 months later. But I think the dynamic is actually primarily about, it's primarily tactical. I think there was not any really coherent plan that I see from the Kremlin, except to keep itself, and the overarching plan is to plug is to prop up the regime with occasional propaganda onslaughts onto. In 2007, it was the UK and various spy scandals. In 2008, it was Georgia. In 2009, who knows what they can pick up, because they can have a bigger PR problem. But I think we should bear in mind that the bottom line is of the Kremlin's policy is not to keep the West out of the Pacific space, but to keep themselves in power.